Hola amigos, sí, esta parte de mi video es en español. ¿Por qué? Porque yo puedo. Ustedes saben, me encantan matemáticos, pero me encantan idiomas también. Me gusta cuando puedo tener una plática con mis amigos de México. Mi español no es perfecto, por supuesto, pero es divertido a usar y aprendo más cada vez. Pero un problema. ¿Cómo aprender más cuando no puedo hablar con mis amigos? Hay programas de televisión, artículos de noticias, libros y otras cosas, pero necesito practicar mi vocabulario cada día. Y este programa es como yo puedo. Ok, es tiempo para inglés. Hello, everyone. So, that bit I've just said wasn't just to try to show off how I've been practicing Spanish for about 2 years now, but it's to show that in addition to all the math videos I've been doing recently, I also have a passion for languages too. Now, many of you probably also want to learn another language, but a lot of people lack the resources to do it effectively. A lot of that comes down to cost. The best way to learn a language is to talk to someone who speaks it natively, but barring that possibility, there is actually quite a bit that you can learn online that will help you to get a language down. And you can accomplish this in a manner that will work for you. So to that end, and also because I love to program, and when you think about it, a computer programming language is just another foreign language to learn, right? But it's also a lot like math with logic and all that. So it's both of my loves in one. So anyway, I'm going to show you step by step how to write a basic flashcard program to help you memorize vocabulary in whatever language you want. And obviously, this video series isn't going to be for everybody, but for those who do want it, I think it will be very beneficial in the end. The best news is everything that I'm going to show you is free to get. So I'm using Visual Studio, which Microsoft provides for free from their website. And I will be demonstrating the C# code that you can just copy and use, right? I don't care. I don't need credits or any of that, right? And I'll also demonstrate several different techniques that I use to help reinforce different parts of my own vocabulary when I'm studying a foreign language. But if you find that a certain method just doesn't work for you, well, you can just ignore that bit. Hopefully you'll be able to practice enough with the C#, and if something doesn't work, you cut that part out. And if you come up with your own ideas, you can just add those in when you're ready to do it. The idea is you have the power to make whatever you want. You don't have to rely on something like Duolingo out there. All right, to start with, we're going to create a new project. And this is going to be a Windows Form app, or Windows Forms app. That is a plural there. We're going to be using C# as our language, so this is perfect for us. And if you need to, switch this to C# up here so that you can get the forms that you need. So after we click this, we click Next, and now we have the opportunity to name our project. I'm going to use the rather mundane Peter's Flashcard program. You can feel free to name this whatever you want. You can choose a location to store this if you want to store it elsewhere. I use my D drive for any of the data that I'm using, so I'm just going to keep that there. And then I'm just going to hit Next with everything else the same. I'm going to leave this as the long-term support. You could go to .NET 5.0, but they're no longer supporting it. There's no reason to go back. So I'll keep it with this, and we'll hit Create. Now this will take just a couple of seconds to actually create the program that we're going to be using. All right, so now that this is in, we can see that it's given us this form. It's always defaulting to form 1 to start with. First thing I do is make this bigger. So we'll pull this out. It doesn't have to be too big. We can resize this later. And in fact, probably we want to give users the ability to resize it on their own. So the first thing I do is I come over here to the menu strip on this column and drag that onto here. We're going to create a file menu to start with, and the file will have the option to exit the program. This gives us the ability to not have to click on the X over here. And also, if you set it up correctly, you'll be able to use keyboard shortcuts to do the Alt F and then X to close automatically. So to do that, we click in this top box here and type an and sign and then type the word file. And then you just hit enter to save it in there. It automatically drops to the next item down. So you can just type the E and then the and sign again, then XIT. Again, that will make the X the key letter. We enter on this. And we've got the regular custom file exit. We can add more items later and rearrange them, so don't worry about getting too far ahead at this point. But we still need to actually be able to do anything. Right now, these menus just exist here and they don't actually do anything. To show, I will just go ahead and save by doing Alt-F-S within the program. That saves it. I think Control-S will also save it. And then we'll run this program by hitting F5. So it'll take just a second to compile what we were on, and then it will produce this. And you can see this window here is our program. And when you click File and choose Exit, nothing happens. Nothing at all, because it doesn't know what the exit means. So we can still use the X up here. But to make this actually do something, let's click on this to select it. That expands this down, and then we double click on the exit here. That launches the code section, and we can now add code to our trigger. You can see up here, it's going to do a item click. So when the exit tool strip menu item is clicked, it's going to come to this little section. This is going to be something that's automatically added to all the objects you double click on. You can also change things later, but for now, we'll just treat it as you double click, it brings you here, you put in the code that you need it to do. So to close the application, we just use the keyword this to make it reference the thing that we just clicked on, dot, and then you can see it autofills on here. Close is a common thing. And so you can just tab twice to accept it, or you can type out close with the parentheses and then the semicolon. Now, once again, we save it and we run it by hitting F5 again. This time when it pops up, we can click on File and Exit, and it closes. Or, let me run it again. We can also, without using the mouse, do Alt-F and then X to do the same exact thing. All right, now that we've got that done, let's go back to the design menu, and let's go ahead and click on here so that the Form 1 is now active on this side. What we want to do is give a title up here that doesn't just say Form 1. And so we go down here where it says text and it says Form 1 here. Don't go up here at the top where the name is Form 1. You don't want to change that here. But down here, we're going to call this something that is related to our program. So I'm calling mine Peter's Flashcard program. So type that in, hit enter. And you can see up here, we now have the title of the program. So when we run it at this point, it's going to have that title instead of saying Form 1. I'm not going to show that just yet because there's other things that we can do before we continue. But make a habit of doing this part. Save. Save frequently. You never know when your computer might crash, so you want to make sure that you're saving everything as frequently as you can. Now, it's time to start considering the design aspect of what we're going to do. A lot of times you might be thinking, well, we'll just start dropping these items on here and start figuring out how we're going to represent things. But I'm talking about design in the sense of the data structure. We need to come up with what type of data are we going to do. Pull this from the other side. So this is just a notepad so I can take quick notes. What is the first thing that we're going to want to have available when somebody is using the program? The very first thing you can think of, the highest level up. I'm thinking of having different users. So for example, you might be the only person who uses your computer program for whatever you're going to do, but maybe you're in a family and you want to have a difference between when you use it and when your son uses it, or when your brother uses it, or when your sister uses it, whatever. In that case, we want to have different users that exist with the different data stored under the user. So we're going to put in here, we need a user for the user object. The user is going to have certain things that are defined per user. This is a flashcard program to really understand languages, so they're going to have a language choice, right? One user might choose a different language than another person. Maybe I want to learn Spanish, but my brother wants to learn French. This will give the ability for each person to use the same program, but to differentiate between which languages they want to use. Or, for that matter, coming back up to the user bit, maybe the user wants to be bilingual. So they're going to have a list of languages that they might want to have. Let's leave that aside for a second here and think further about what does a language need? Obviously, a language is going to need words in that language. I'm going to put that here for now because that's going to be a different object as well. But what else does a language have? Languages have things like, is it right to left or left to right? English is left to right, but a language like Arabic or Hebrew goes right to left. So we want to make sure that we can accomplish both of those if that's what we're going to do. What's another thing that a language might need? We'll just put on here perhaps a font, or better way to say it is like Unicode characters for that specific language. So when we're thinking about the language itself, languages usually represent specific countries or groups of countries. So maybe you want to have an identifier like a flag icon for the language. We want to have the name of the language that is going to be listed. Okay, things like this. And these are not necessarily in order. We're just collecting the data that we want to have for our language right now. So then the words themselves that are in a language. When we're thinking of the words, we're going to need something that has the word name. Let's call it the name for lack of a better term. And then we're going to need the translation of that term, and possibly translations plural, because maybe a word has multiple meanings. In fact, almost every word does have multiple meanings. Then next up, we're going to think we need to represent the word with a sound. So we're going to need an audio file of it. Some words might need a picture. And actually, I'm going to use the word image because that is better to represent it than a picture. So yeah, we can have a word that's presented. We can have translations. We can have audio of it. We can have a picture representing it. Perhaps we also want to include aspects of grammar in it, right? So we can think of grammar. I think that's the correct way to spell the word grammar. So this gives us just a rough estimate. Now, I don't really want to include every bit of this in there, especially not at first, but we might want to consider having a lot of this to start with. So let's think of our users. So with the user object itself, we're going to need an ID. We use IDs just to differentiate between the different objects that are created. So we'll have a user with ID of 0, of 1, of 2. You can make it whatever you want, but I'm thinking this is going to be an integer value, right? So that's easy enough. Then we're going to have a user name. This is going to be something like a user name that we use to log in. Perhaps first and last name, if you want to do it that way. I prefer username, and so I'm going to stick with that. But if you're doing a program and you want to include other details, add them in this part. Then we're going to need the user with a native language. I'll do it this way. I can language. There we go. I can obviously type correctly. What language are we translating into? We want to make sure that the user can select their actual language. So we'll put in here what is the native language for the user. Better than using the native language though is let's do the translated language. The reason I say that is maybe you don't want to have it go to your native language. Maybe you want to learn 2 languages at the same time. Maybe you're familiar with a second language and you just want to practice it while learning a third language. That's definitely a possibility. It might not be your native language, so let's use the word translated language there. Obviously, then we're going to need to have the target language, and that's going to be what language do we want to translate from? Okay, so we'll include that target language. And then, of course, we want to do user multilingual. I think that's how you spell it. Doesn't really matter. We're just gathering thoughts at this point. So multilingual, this is going to be a Boolean. It'll be true or false. Either we want to have them do one language at a time, or they can do multiple languages at the same time. Basically, when we construct this together, we can either make it manually where they choose specific decks of flashcards. So if you want to do French, you grab French. If you want to do Spanish, you do Spanish. Or we could just have it multilingual where they grab all of them. If they're studying both French and Spanish, you just grab mixtures of both, put them all together. That's a lot harder to do, but if you're more familiar with each individual language, it might be the better way to go. So I don't know, for now, this might be a good basic level, but we also want to know, how is the user doing? So some kind of user measurement metric, I haven't come up with a name yet, equals how do we tell the user how well they are learning? Okay, do we use it like a gamification where we give them XP and they get experience points for translating a word correctly, and they can look and see, hey, I'm at this level, you know, maybe a level system there. Or do we want to come up with a different way to measure how well they know things? And is this better maybe on the individual language that they're learning, because each language will be different? See, these are the kind of data construction things that you kind of do have to think about while you're building these. The good news is you don't have to do all of them at once. You just have to be prepared to expand if you need to expand into them. So enough brainstorming for now. Let's go ahead and start building something. And then once that something exists, we will then be able to start fleshing out better what we want to do. So from this, what we've got is we want to make three objects at least. So we're going to need a user object, we're going to need a language object, and we're going to need a words object. So these are kind of nestled under each other. So the user object will have various languages. The languages will have different words. And when I say words, it might be phrases. We might be doing sentences, things like that as well. So don't think of this too strictly yet. We're just kind of trying to conceptualize what we're going to be doing. So with this kind of thing in mind, let's go ahead and just create a couple of classes for our program that we're going to need later. So to do the classes, come up here to the project and we do add class. And what I'm going to do first is we're just going to use a user class. We're going to add that in. We're going to leave this alone for now, go back to the project. I'm going to add another class. This is going to be the language class. And finally, project add class. And this is going to be the words class. And actually, while I'm thinking about it, let's add in one more class here, which I'm going to call our lexicon class. Now, why am I choosing a lexicon class? When we're thinking about the different languages that we'll have and the different words that we have, we want to be able to combine different languages together. All we're going to do with the lexicon is we're going to pick the native language, so you use whichever one you want for yourself, and then we'll be matching all other words to that key word. So let's go back here to where I guess words is the first one on here. One thing that we're going to do is every single one of these needs an ID. So let's do an int ID equals, and we'll start with 0. And we'll just add this into every single one of them. Here. And oh, lexicon's back here. Okay, let's go here. So int ID equals 0. So I'll save everything. It looks like each tab saves one at a time. Let's see, there's going to be a save all button, I'm sure. Let me see. Save all is Control-Shift-S. So you can use that one to save with all of them. So let me go to the user tab and just focused on this one, and I'm looking at the time. So I know that this is going a little bit long for the first video. So I'm not going to do too much more, but let's just put in a string of username, and we'll start it off as an empty. We're going to fill out some of this later, but we know that we're going to need the username here. It's prompting for a password. We're not using passwords on this. You could use a password if you wanted to, but I'm not going to do that. And actually, let me just go ahead and stop at this point for now. We'll call it a day with this. And in the next video, I will start kicking off on some more of the actual code. So with all that, I hope you do have a wonderful day.